two types of conflict: outer conflict and inner conflict. The vast majority of conflict that we experience is actually the inner conflict type, meaning it might manifest outside, but it has been created on the inside, or it has been cooked on the inside. Many times we'll say, well, I didn't start it. He started it. She started it. Okay, cello, started outside, but I've cooked it on the inside. I took what that person said or did, and now that which began outside has become inside. Then, of course, I say or do something in response. It's manifesting outer, but the real impact of that conflict is on me on the inside. My stomach is now in a knot. I can't digest my food properly. My heart is beating very fast. I'm not feeling comfortable in my own body because of this conflict. Very, very few of us. There are some situations that are only outer conflict. If you were living on the border in Kashmir, or you were living in parts of Israel or Palestine, you were living in parts of Syria or Iraq or so many other parts of the world where the conflict really is outside. You go to sleep at night not knowing whether someone is going to show up in your house in the middle of the night to murder you and burn down your house. That level of outer conflict exists. By God's grace, though, very few of us are living in that type of outer conflict. So for most of us, when we say, no, 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 conflict under me, conflict bahar hai, it's not me, it's outside. We're not talking about warring countries or warring groups who are literally killing each other with bullets flying over our heads. What we're talking about is, she doesn't like the way I load the dishwasher. She doesn't like the way I cook food. He criticizes the way I dress. They yell at me for this. He doesn't understand me. She doesn't respect me. It's that type of criticism, that type of conflict. But we say, no, no, it's outside. Problem is not with me. Problem is outside. I'm very good, but he just doesn't treat me with respect. I'm very good, but he doesn't treat me with love. So we would call that an outer conflict. And yet, it really is an inner conflict. And the reason is, the person outside is just doing what they do. They're speaking, they're acting in certain ways. We are the ones who have turned those words or those actions into our inner conflict. We are the ones who can't sleep, can't eat, because of what the other person is doing. We give the example so frequently of if you're walking through a park and you get bit by the mad dog. Neither do you chase the dog to bite it again, nor do you need therapy for feeling like such a victim that you were attacked by a mad dog. We understand the dog is sick. I used to work a lot with children who suffered from a lot of different types of brain damage or developmental issues. And when you work with particularly children with for example, autism, what you find is you could approach them with love. You go up, put your hand behind them with all the love in the world. But if at that moment they're in the middle of some internal situation, they're going to turn around and hit you in the eye. Now, they didn't do it because they hate you. They didn't do it because there's something wrong to create conflict. In fact, it has nothing to do with you. Because of the disease that they are experiencing, the challenge that they are experiencing, even though you approach them with love, what you got is hit. But we would never respond by saying, "तुम क्या समझते हो अपने आप को," and hitting him again. We would understand that Bachari is sick. I didn't know. Now I know not to touch him, particularly from behind. And I give those two examples because when people hurt us, when people bring pain to our lives, most of the time it's because they are in pain personally. Puja Swamiji always says so beautifully, when we are in peace, we exude peace, we manifest peace, we spread peace. When we are in pieces, that's what we spread. So if people are making us miserable, they're insulting, they're yelling, they're criticizing, chances are it's because inside of them there is misery. So even though there is this conflict on the outside, they're yelling at us, they're criticizing us, they're insulting us, we don't have to turn that into an inner conflict. Just like getting bit by the dog or being hit by the boy with autism doesn't create an inner conflict. We bandage the wound, maybe we put ice on our eye, but it doesn't create an internal conflict that keeps us from eating or sleeping, that makes us wonder, why me? Why me? Maine kya kiya? I was just with love. But the last piece that I want to mention here is the other angle. All of us are moving through this world with our own impressions, our own sanskaras, our own history. Each of us has experienced different things in our life, particularly in our childhood, which lays the impressions for the patterns that stay with us throughout our lives. And if we don't address that, if we don't address issues from our past, issues that created pain, we actually recreate those situations in the present. So, let's say I was abandoned and abused in my childhood. I'm going to create situations in my life in which people around me, and if I was abandoned and abused by a male figure, I'll create these with men. If I was abandoned and abused by a female figure, I'll tend to create them with females. We're going to keep recreating these situations in our lives because ultimately the goal is for us to learn from it. The goal of our human birth is not everything should be perfect. You should only experience success, wealth, joy, fruits. The whole point is that we learn, that we experience, that we wake up. And so we're going to keep getting the same situations, unconsciously recreating the same situations until we learn from them. If in my family I was a middle child, I was ignored. My younger sibling was the baby, the older one was the smart one and the firstborn, and I was kind of in the middle and always ignored. I'm going to keep recreating that in my life. With friends, with colleagues, in my family situation. I'm going to keep recreating a situation of feeling ignored, feeling worthless, until I can actually deeply address and heal the first situation. Not heal it with my friends, heal it with my current family, heal it with my colleagues, but heal it internally from what happened in my childhood. We carry that pain, we carry those patterns, and that's why we keep recreating them. Someone in our childhood told us, you're worthless, you'll never be anything. Well, I'm going to create that. I'm going to make sure that I keep failing, that I don't even try, unconsciously, that whatever I do never works out, because I need to actually face and then heal from the impression that I got as a child of you're worthless, you'll never become anything. That's the only last part of where the other examples were outer things that we internalized. But this is actually an internal conflict that I'm turning into outer conflicts. With friends, with colleagues, with neighbors, with spouses, with parents-in-law, the new family. I'm going to recreate this, bringing conflict from the inner to the outer. So the only way to have peace in any of these situations is to have it from within, such that I don't bring the outer to the inner, and such that the inner itself becomes so peaceful that I don't need to recreate conflict in the world around me. He's asked how to deal with conflicts that have been created by other people in the past, but that are still there in the present. Do you mean on an individual personal level, or are you talking like a global level in terms of things like hunger? Okay, both. Well, let's take personal first. Conflicts that have been created by others, but that we find ourselves in the middle of. Look, you're across the street, neighbors are fighting. Okay? Conflict created by others. If their house is far enough away from you that you can't actually hear them shouting at each other, it's not going to bother you. You'll notice it. If somebody asks you, how are your neighbors, you'll say, my God, they fight all the time. But it's not going to bother you. You're not going to wander through your life wondering, what should I do about my neighbors who keep fighting? But if they are your next door neighbors, and you share a well with them, and all day, every day, all you can hear in your house is their shouting, now that has become your problem. We only look for solutions to conflicts that end up impacting us, mostly. Most of us are not very worried about our across the street, far down the road neighbors who fight. We have too much to worry about in our own lives. So it's conflict that we end up being impacted by. Typically, it's people in our space, our family members, our colleagues or employers or employees in the workplace, very, very close neighbors. The best thing to do in that situation, number one, particularly if it's within your family, within your friend circle, within your immediate workplace, is to keep reminding yourself, number one, that the conflict is not about you. And this may sound very obvious, but it's very important. In America, where I'm from, we have a divorce rate that is very, very high. In India, fortunately, the divorce rate is still very low. But when you have children of divorced parents, even if the parents got divorced when the child was very young, inevitably the children on some level feel that the divorce was their fault. And you deal with children who grow up feeling like they are the ones to blame, when obviously everyone knows it had nothing to do with this child. It was a man and woman who couldn't get along. But we internalize external conflict.